In 1942, a recruiter for the United States Marine Corps looked across his desk and tried not to laugh. Standing in front of him was a kid who looked like he had gotten lost on his way to middle school. He was 5 feet 5 inches tall. He weighed 112 pounds. His face was smooth, innocent, and completely unsuited for war. The recruiter stamped "Rejected" on his file. He told the boy that the Marines were looking for men, not children. The paratroopers told him the same thing. They said the static line jump would probably snap his legs in half. They didn't know they had just rejected the most lethal soldier in American history. Audie Leon Murphy was born into the dirt-poor poverty of rural Texas. He was one of 12 children in a sharecropping family. His father abandoned them, and his mother died when he was a teenager. Hunger was his primary education. By the age of 10, Audie was the family provider. He hunted rabbits and squirrels with a rusted .22 caliber rifle. He couldn't afford to miss. In the Depression, bullets cost money. If Audie pulled the trigger and didn't bring back meat, the family didn't eat that night. This was where he learned the cold mathematics of killing. He learned to control his breathing. He learned to wait for the perfect shot. He learned that hesitation meant starvation. When the Army finally accepted him, mostly to use him as a runner or a clerk, they sent him to North Africa. But Audie Murphy didn't stay a clerk. He pushed his way to the front lines. In the mountains of Sicily and the mud of Italy, the boy began to disappear. In his place, a terrifying soldier emerged. He didn't look like a warrior. He still had that baby face, but his eyes had changed. They were flat, gray, and empty. The transformation became complete during the invasion of southern France in August 1944. Audie was fighting alongside his best friend, Laddie Tipton. They encountered a German machine gun nest on a hill. The Germans waved a white flag signaling surrender. Tipton, relieved, stood up to accept them. It was a trick. The Germans cut Tipton down with a burst of machine gun fire. Something inside Audie Murphy snapped. It wasn't bravery anymore. It was pure, distilled rage. He didn't take cover. He grabbed a German machine gun and walked straight into the enemy fire. He single-handedly wiped out the German position, killing the men who had tricked his friend. He then took their gun, spun around, and cleared out 2 more positions. From that day on, he was different. He was no longer just a soldier following orders. He was a hunter. By late 1944, the casualty rates in the 3rd Infantry Division were catastrophic. Officers were dropping like flies. Lieutenants lasted days. Captains lasted weeks. Audie Murphy rose through the ranks not because he sought glory, but because everyone above him was dead. He went from private to staff sergeant to lieutenant strictly through attrition. By January 1945, as his unit approached the freezing hell of the Colmar Pocket in France, Murphy was the commander of Company B. But Company B was a name only. It was supposed to be 235 men. It was down to barely 30. Audie himself was a wreck. He had taken shrapnel in his heel. He had been shot in the hip. He was suffering from a severe case of malaria that made him shake with fevers in the freezing snow. He looked like a ghost. But as he looked out over the frozen fields of Holzwehr, watching the German tanks massing in the tree line, the 19-year-old boy from Texas checked his carbine. The Marines had rejected him for being too small. The Germans were about to wish he had never been born. The killer was ready. The winter of 1944-45 in the Alsace region of France was the coldest in 50 years. But for the men of the U.S. 3rd Infantry Division, the temperature wasn't measured in degrees. It was measured in lost toes. By late January, the Colmar Pocket, a stubborn bulge of German resistance on the west bank of the Rhine, had become a frozen graveyard. The ground was so hard that entrenching tools bounced off it like they were hitting concrete. You couldn't dig a foxhole. You couldn't hide. You just had to lie on top of the ice and pray the artillery shells missed. Lieutenant Audie Murphy and Company B had been chewed up. A full-strength infantry company was supposed to have 235 men. On the morning of January 26, 1945, near the tiny village of Holtzwehr, Murphy looked around at his command. There were 19 men left. 19. That wasn't a company, it was barely a patrol, and they were walking corpses. Their uniforms were stiff with frozen mud and blood. Their boots, unsuited for the severe winter, were soaked through, turning feet black with trench foot. Murphy himself was barely standing. The malaria he had contracted in Italy was raging again, his body alternating between burning fevers and uncontrollable shivering. He had a shrapnel wound in one leg that hadn't healed. He was 19 years old. He was the only officer left alive, and he was in charge of holding the line against the entire German 2nd Mountain Division. The position was a tactical nightmare. Company B was ordered to hold a clearing on the edge of the woods. Before them lay a flat, open expanse of snow-covered field leading to the village. There was no cover, no rocks, no trees, no ridges, just white death. To support this suicide mission, headquarters sent up 2 M10 tank destroyers. These were tracked vehicles with big guns, but they were open-topped and thinly armored. Worse, the icy roads had turned them into clumsy sleds. As they maneuvered into position, they were sliding dangerously, struggling to find traction on the frozen earth. At 1400 hours, the silence broke. It started with a low rumble that vibrated through the soles of their boots. The men of Company B looked across the white field and saw the shapes emerging from the tree line near Holtzwehr. First came the infantry. They were dressed in white snow camouflage capes, making them look like ghosts drifting across the ice. There were hundreds of them, at least 2 full companies, maybe 600 men. They moved with the precision of fresh troops, not the ragged exhaustion of the Americans. Then came the monsters. Behind the infantry, 6 German tanks rolled out. To the terrified American GIs, every German tank was a Tiger, but these were likely Jagdpanthers, heavy tank destroyers with sloping armor and a terrifying 88mm cannon. Their tracks churned the snow into black slush. Their engines roared, a mechanical predator sound that drowned out the wind. Murphy looked at his 19 shivering men. They had M1 rifles and a few grenades. Against 6 tanks and 600 men, they were nothing. They were speed bumps. The German tanks opened fire. The sound was deafening. The first 88mm shell screamed across the field and slammed into one of the American M10 tank destroyers. It was a direct hit. The vehicle didn't just catch fire, it erupted. The crew scrambled out, some burning, diving into the snow. The second M10, seeing the destruction, tried to maneuver to fire back, but its tracks spun uselessly on the ice. It slid into a ditch, its gun pointing helplessly at the sky. The crew bailed out. Now, Company B was alone. No armor support, no artillery support, just 19 men in a hole in the snow, watching an avalanche of steel rolling toward them. Murphy knew the calculus of war. If they stayed, they would be encircled and slaughtered in 5 minutes. If they ran, they would be shot in the back. He made a decision that defied logic. He grabbed his field telephone, a wired connection to the artillery battalion miles behind the lines. He turned to his men, his face pale and gaunt, his eyes burning with that cold gray fire. He screamed over the roar of the engines, "Get back to the woods! Pull back to the tree line! I'll hold them here." The men hesitated. Leave the lieutenant alone? "Go!" Murphy shouted, shoving the nearest soldier toward the trees. "That's an order! Get back!" As the last of his ragtag group scrambled back through the snow towards the safety of the forest, Audie Murphy stood alone on the burning edge of the field. He held a carbine in one hand and the telephone receiver in the other. He was 5'5". He was sick, he was surrounded, and he was about to start a war all by himself. The attack did not begin with a shout. It began with a tremor in the earth that traveled up through the frozen soles of the American boots. At 1400 hours on January 26, 1945, the tree line outside the village of Holtsoir, France, seemed to come alive. To the exhausted, freezing men of Company B, it looked like the snow itself was attacking them. First came the infantry. 2 full companies of German soldiers, Gebirgsjäger, elite mountain troops, emerged from the woods. They were dressed in winter-white camouflage capes, moving like ghosts against the snow. There were over 250 of them, advancing at a disciplined skirmish line. Their machine guns, the terrifying MG-42s, began to rip into the American positions, the distinct ripping canvas sound echoing across the valley. But the infantry was just the hammer. The anvil was behind them. 6 German tanks rolled out of the woods. To the terrifying eyes of the infantrymen, they looked like tigers, the invincible monsters of the battlefield. In reality, they were likely Jagd Panther tank destroyers, low-profile killers with thick, sloping armor and a massive 88mm main gun that could punch through Allied armor like wet cardboard. The roaring of their engines drowned out the wind. Their tracks churned the pristine white snow into a muddy black slush. They moved with the confidence of predators who knew their prey was trapped. Lieutenant Audie Murphy had only 2 unarmored M10 tank destroyers to support his 19 men. It was a mismatch of suicidal proportions. The German gunners didn't hesitate. The lead tank swiveled its 88mm cannon toward the M10 on Murphy's right flank. There was a flash, a scream of displacing air, and then a catastrophic impact. The shell struck the M10 dead center. The vehicle shuddered violently and erupted into flames. The crew scrambled out, choking in black smoke, dragging their wounded into the snow. The tank destroyer was finished, turning into a burning pyre of diesel and ammunition. The second M10, seeing the fate of the first, tried to maneuver for a better shot, but the ground was a sheet of ice. The tracks spun uselessly, losing traction. The vehicle slid uncontrollably sideways and lurched into a drainage ditch, its gun pointing uselessly at the sky. Its crew, realizing they were sitting ducks, bailed out and ran for the woods. Company B was now naked. Lieutenant Audie Murphy looked at his men. They were prone in the snow, their faces pressed into the dirt as machine gun bullets snapped over their heads. They were freezing, terrified, and out of ammunition. If the German tanks reached their position, they would be crushed under the treads. If the infantry reached them, they would be overrun in seconds. Murphy made the only decision that could save them. He knew that a retreat across open ground under fire was a death sentence unless someone stayed behind to cover it. He grabbed his field telephone, a bulky receiver connected by a long wire to the artillery battalion miles to the rear. "Get back!" Murphy screamed at his men, his voice cracking over the roar of battle. "Get to the woods! Pull back to the tree line!" His men hesitated. They didn't want to leave their lieutenant. They looked at him, a small, frail figure standing near the burning M10. "That's an order!" Murphy yelled, waving his carabine toward the trees. "Go! Now!" Reluctantly, the 19 survivors of Company B crawled backward, slipping and sliding through the snow toward the safety of the forest edge, 300 yards away. They looked back one last time. Lieutenant Audie Murphy was alone. He stood in a shallow foxhole on the edge of the clearing. To his left, the burning M10 tank destroyer was spewing black smoke and flames, threatening to explode at any second. In front of him, 6 tanks and hundreds of infantry were closing in. He had a carbine, a telephone, and a map. The Germans ignored him. Why would they worry about one man? They saw the main American force retreating. They thought the battle was already won. They believed the little officer by the burning tank was just a straggler, a dead man walking. They were wrong. The tiger had roared,
But the wolf was waiting. Audie Murphy wasn't retreating. He was calling for fire.
The German infantrymen were confident. They saw the Americans retreat into the woods. They saw the burning American tank destroyer spewing black smoke into the gray sky. They assumed the vehicle was abandoned. Who in their right mind would stay near a burning ammunition dump? They were about to meet the exception. Lieutenant Audie Murphy didn't run. Instead, he looked at the burning M10. On top of its turret, exposed to the wind and the enemy, was a 50 caliber M2 Browning machine gun. It was the only weapon left on the field capable of stopping the wave of gray uniforms. Murphy didn't hesitate. He climbed up the hull of the burning vehicle. The metal was hot enough to melt the snow in his boots. Inside the hull, the ammunition was cooking off, popping and banging like firecrackers, threatening to detonate the main magazine at any second. Murphy ignored it. He dragged his field telephone wire with him, swung his leg over the turret, and grabbed the spade grips of the machine gun. The Germans were less than 100 yards away when the Mad Deuce opened up. The sound was a rhythmic, heavy thumping that drowned out the crackle of the flames. The 50 caliber bullets, each the size of a human thumb, tore into the advancing German line. The first rank of German soldiers simply disintegrated. Confusion rippled through the enemy ranks. They couldn't see the shooter. Murphy was shrouded in the thick black smoke billowing from the burning tank. To the Germans, it looked like the fire itself was shooting at them. They dove into the snow, searching for cover where there was none. On the other end of the telephone line, back at the Fire Direction Center, an artillery officer was listening in horror. Murphy's voice was calm, almost bored, reciting coordinates. Coordinate X-ray, drop 50, fire for effect. The artillery shells whistled overhead, slamming into the frozen earth, throwing up geysers of dirt and snow. The German infantry, pinned down by Murphy's machine gun, were now being shredded by American howitzers. Murphy was fighting two battles at once. With his right hand, he was firing bursts from the machine gun, traversing the turret to cut down squads of Germans trying to flank him. With his left hand, he held the receiver, adjusting the artillery fire like a conductor directing an orchestra of destruction. The German tanks, realizing they were under attack, began to hunt him. They couldn't target the infantry in the woods, so they turned their massive 88mm guns toward the only source of resistance, the burning tank destroyer. Shells screamed past Murphy's head. Machine gun bullets sparked off the turret, stinging his face with metal fragments. One blast knocked him backward, slamming against the steel. His leg was bleeding. His uniform was soaked in blood and oil, but he pulled himself back up to the gun. "How close are they?" The voice on the phone crackled, frantic with worry. Murphy looked over the side of the tank. German soldiers were crawling in a ditch just 50 yards away. "Just hold the phone and I'll let you speak to one of the bastards," Murphy quipped darkly. The German infantry, desperate to silence the gun, mounted a charge. A squad of 12 men rose up and rushed the tank. Murphy swiveled the 50 cal. He cut them down in a single long burst. Their bodies fell in a heap in the snow. But there were too many of them. They were flanking him on the right. They were closing the distance, 50 yards, 40 yards. Murphy shouted into the phone, "Drop at 50, fire on my position." "Lieutenant, that's right on top of you," the artillery officer screamed back. "We'll blow you to pieces." "I don't give a damn," Murphy yelled, firing another burst. "Drop 50, fire." Seconds later, the ground shook. The American artillery shells landed with terrifying precision, walking a wall of fire right up to the tracks of Murphy's burning tank. The concussion nearly blew him off the turret. Shrapnel pinged off the hull, but the gamble worked. The German assault wave was vaporized. The survivors, terrified by the suicidal resistance of this ghost of Holzwehr, broke and ran. The German tanks, seeing their infantry support stripped away and destroyed, had no choice. A tank without infantry is blind. They threw their engines into reverse and began to back away towards the village. For 60 minutes, one man, 5 feet 5 inches tall, shaking with malaria, standing on a burning bomb, had held off an entire German task force. As the last German helmet disappeared into the woods, the ammunition inside the M10 finally gave up. Murphy felt the vibration change. He threw the phone down and limped off the tank, collapsing into the snow. Moments later, the M10 exploded, sending the turret flying into the air. The blast would have vaporized him if he had stayed a second longer. Audie Murphy lay in the snow, surrounded by the bodies of 50 German soldiers, the phone line dead, the gun silent. He was alive, and he had won.
The explosion of the M10 tank destroyer marked the end of the battle, but it was just the beginning of the legend. As the twisted metal of the vehicle rained down around him, Lieutenant Audie Murphy lay in the snow, his ears ringing, his body shaking from a combination of malaria, exhaustion, and the adrenaline crash. He was bleeding from a leg wound. His uniform was scorched. He was alone in a field of corpses. But what happened next defines the man even more than the hour he spent on the burning tank. Murphy stood up. He didn't call for a medic. He didn't collapse. He turned and walked back to the tree line where his 19 terrified men were waiting. They looked at him as if he were a ghost. They had watched the entire spectacle, the single machine gun holding back an army, the artillery strikes, the tank exploding. They couldn't believe he was alive. Murphy looked at them, his face a mask of soot and blood. "Refill your ammo," he said, his voice flat. "We're going back." It was insanity, but it was the insanity of leadership. Rallying his men, Murphy led a counterattack against the retreating Germans. The Germans, already demoralized by the monster on the tank, broke completely. By nightfall, the village of Holzwehr was in American hands. When the smoke cleared, they counted the cost. Over 50 German soldiers lay dead or wounded around the wreck of Murphy's tank. He had stopped an entire armored task force single-handedly. For his actions that day, Audie Murphy received the Medal of Honor. He became the most decorated soldier of World War II, receiving every combat award of valor available from the U.S. Army, plus French and Belgian decorations. He was 20 years old. He was a national hero. Life magazine put his face on the cover. Hollywood called. But the war didn't end for Audie Murphy in 1945. The legacy of Holzwehr was not just a medal, it was a shadow that followed him for the rest of his life. When he returned to Texas, he wasn't the same boy who had hunted rabbits. He was shattered. He suffered from what was then called battle fatigue, what we now know as severe post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. For years, he couldn't sleep without a loaded German Luger pistol under his pillow. He had terrible nightmares where the faces of the men he killed and the friends he lost came back to haunt him. He would wake up screaming, holding the gun at the darkness. He became addicted to sleeping pills just to close his eyes. He had violent mood swings. He gambled away a fortune. The boy with the baby face had seen too much death to ever truly live in peace again. Yet Murphy found a new kind of courage. In an era when mental health was a taboo subject, when soldiers were told to suck it up, Audie Murphy spoke out. He publicly admitted his struggles with nightmares and addiction. He advocated for the Korean War veterans returning home, demanding that the government study the psychological effects of combat. He used his fame to shine a light on the invisible wounds of war. He even played himself in the movie To Hell and Back, based on his autobiography. Critics said he seemed detached in the film, that he didn't act terrified enough. They didn't understand. He wasn't acting, he was remembering.
On May 28, 1971, Audie Murphy died in a plane crash in the mountains of Virginia. He was 45 years old. Today, he lies in Arlington National Cemetery. His grave is the second most visited, just after President John F. Kennedy. But unlike the grand monuments of generals, his headstone is standard government issue, indistinguishable from the thousands of other soldiers around him. That is how he wanted it. The ghost of Holtzwehr never saw himself as a hero. He always said the real heroes were the ones who never came home, the friends like Laddie Tipton, whose death had turned a boy into a warrior. Audie Murphy survived the frozen hell of France, but a part of him remained there, standing alone on a